I'll never forget that night. It was supposed to be nothing more than a casual reunion dinner, Daniel's old classmates from college getting together at a fancy restaurant in the city. I didn't even want to go, honestly. I had Sophie with me. She was only 5. And the idea of sitting around a big round table with people I barely knew didn't sound fun, but Daniel insisted. He said it was important and that I should show up with him. So I went. The evening started out harmless. People were laughing too loud, telling stories about their wild days in college, passing bottles of wine around like they were back in a dorm room. I sat there peeling shrimp for Sophie, who was trying her best to sit still even though the noise was making her shrink into herself. And then it happened. One of the women, Melissa, his so-called old desk mate, got picked to share some kind of dare. They were playing a game with cards, and hers told her to reveal the wildest thing she'd ever done. She hesitated, blushed just enough to look coy, and then let it slip. "I once had Daniel help me change my bra," she said, smirking, eyes darting toward me. The table exploded with laughter. Some people whistled. Someone asked, "Wait, when was that?" Melissa leaned back in her chair, eyes shining with mischief, and said slowly, "On his wedding day, in the changing room, right next to his wife's gown, my gown." I froze. The shrimp slipped out of my fingers and dropped into the sauce dish, splattering oil. My chest tightened. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Daniel immediately frowned and tapped the edge of Melissa's plate with his chopsticks, his voice sharp. "Knock it off. Don't talk nonsense." But she only laughed, brushing his hand away like it was some kind of joke. "What?" I didn't say anything bad. It's true though. We were so close I could feel his heartbeat. I was afraid to even breathe too loud. More laughter. Someone clapped the table. Phones came out, ready to record, and in that moment, the room started spinning for me. My daughter tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy, why is that lady smiling at Daddy like that?" Nobody cared about the little girl sitting there, frightened and confused. Nobody even noticed her. The game went on, and wouldn't you know, Daniel's card came up next. His task? To recreate the most classic confession scene with a girl in the room. And of course, the crowd went wild, chanting for him to do it with Melissa. He hesitated, ears a little red, but then stood up with that same half smile he always wore when he was pretending to be reluctant but secretly enjoying the attention. Melissa grabbed his sleeve before I could even process what was happening, pulling him closer. She tilted her face up toward him, lips almost brushing his jawline, and the crowd roared. Camera flashes went off like it was a damn stage show. My stomach churned. I couldn't take another second. I slammed my chopsticks down, the sound sharp enough to silence the entire room. "Sophie," I said, my voice low and shaking. "Cover your ears." She did as I asked, eyes wide and scared, and then I picked up the untouched glass of water in front of me and threw it to the floor. The crash echoed like a gunshot. Water splashed across shoes and pants, shards scattered everywhere. The room froze. I stood, my voice so calm it scared even me. "If you all want a show so badly, let me call someone to give you a real stage." I pulled out my phone, dialed 3 digits, and put it on speaker. "Yes, this is 911. I'd like to report a group engaging in obscene games at the Grandview Hotel, 3rd floor banquet hall." Daniel's face went pale. He lunged across the table to grab my phone. "Emily, what the hell is wrong with you? Can't you take a joke?" I stared at him, at the hand Melissa still had on his arm, and something inside me just cracked. "Tell me, Daniel, how are you going to explain this to Sophie when she grows up? That her father thought his friendship was worth humiliating her mother in front of a crowd?" He yanked his arm free from Melissa, glaring at me, his voice low and furious. "Why do you always have to make a scene? Why do you have to embarrass me in front of everyone?" I laughed. God help me, I laughed, though my chest was burning. "Embarrass you? No, Daniel, you've been doing that yourself for years." I grabbed Sophie's little hand and walked out. He followed me into the hallway, shouting about how I was being unreasonable, about how Melissa was just a friend, how they were only joking. I kept walking. Sophie clung to me, trembling, her tears wetting my shoulder. When we got home that night, I tucked Sophie into bed, humming to her until she finally stopped shaking. Then I sat alone in the living room, staring at my phone. For the first time, I scrolled to a number I had saved years ago but never called, a divorce attorney. I pressed dial. "Hello, this is Collins, Associates." A calm male voice answered. My own voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Hi, my name is Emily Parker. I need some legal advice. It's about divorce and custody of my daughter." The lawyer's voice was steady, professional, like he'd had this same conversation 1,000 times before. Mrs. Parker, the custody arrangement will depend heavily on evidence. Document everything: text messages, financial records, proof of who takes care of your daughter, anything that shows your husband's neglect. Stay calm and keep collecting. It will matter. Collect evidence. The words echoed in my head long after I hung up. They gave me something solid to hold on to, like a life raft in a storm. Daniel didn't even come into our bedroom that night. He stayed in the guest room, laughing into his headset with his friends until 2 in the morning. I sat there in the dark, listening to his muffled voice through the walls. My daughter curled against me, and I knew I couldn't let this man raise Sophie without me. The next morning he stumbled out around noon, rubbing his temples like he had the world's worst hangover. I was spoon-feeding Sophie some scrambled eggs, keeping my eyes on hers so I wouldn't have to meet his. He poured himself a glass of water, cleared his throat, and muttered, "You overreacted last night. Melissa was just joking. Don't take everything so damn personally." I didn't respond. He slammed the glass down harder than necessary, water sloshing over the rim. "I'm talking to you, Emily. What do you want me to do? Get on my knees?" Sophie flinched. She froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth, eyes wide. I finally looked at him, my voice flat. "You couldn't afford it. Not with all those years you've spent kneeling to your friends instead of being a father." His mouth opened, then closed, like he wasn't sure what to say. Anger flickered in his eyes, but I didn't wait for the explosion. I scooped Sophie up and carried her into the bedroom. That was the start of our silent war. From that day on, Daniel and I barely spoke except to argue. He accused me of being cold, unreasonable, paranoid. I focused on Sophie, on keeping a calm routine for her, while inside I was building a case brick by brick. I started small: screenshots of his late-night messages, a short video from a friend of a friend who'd been at that awful dinner, capturing Melissa draping herself over him, bank statements that showed how little money was actually going toward the household, compared to the expensive dinners and drinks he covered for his friends. Every piece I saved felt like a stone I was quietly stacking into a wall between us. But I also knew I couldn't go into that courtroom with empty pockets. I had no job, no income. Daniel would use that against me. And he wouldn't be wrong. I'd given up my career years ago to stay home with Sophie. That had been our deal. Or at least I thought it was. Turns out it was just my sacrifice. So I updated my resume. God, it looked pathetic. 10 years out of the workforce, a degree I barely remembered, and a short stint at an office job before Sophie was born. I sent it out anyway, to every company within driving distance. Rejections came fast. Some didn't even bother replying. Others gave me polite "we've moved forward with another candidate" emails that stung worse than silence. One interview ended with the manager smiling stiffly and saying, "We're really looking for someone younger, more up to date with the software." I walked out of that building feeling like I was carrying every year of my age on my shoulders. By the fourth rejection, I cried in my car. I cried so hard I couldn't start the engine. Sophie's teacher called at that exact moment to say she'd developed a slight fever, and I had to wipe my face, pull myself together, and race to pick her up. She curled into my arms as I carried her to the car, whispering, "I don't feel good, Mommy." Her forehead burned against my neck. When we got home, Daniel wasn't there. The house was silent except for Sophie's weak coughs. I gave her medicine, held her on the couch, stroked her hair while her little body shivered. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Do you need money?" "Don't be too proud to ask." I stared at the screen, throat tight. I didn't want to ask. I wanted to stand on my own, but God, it was tempting that night, sitting in the dim light of the living room. I promised myself something. I would find a job, any job, office, retail, diner waitress, I didn't care. I would make it work. And maybe fate decided to give me one small break, because 2 days later, my phone rang. A local trading company had seen my resume. They wanted me to come in for an interview for an admin position. The manager, Mrs. Williams, was a tough-looking woman in her 40s. With sharp eyes that seemed to cut right through me, she glanced at my resume and raised an eyebrow. "You've been out of work for 10 years? Yes." My voice shook, but I steadied it. "I stayed home to raise my daughter, but now I need to provide for her. And I'm ready to work as hard as it takes." She asked me to type up a form on the spot. My fingers stumbled on the keyboard, slower than they used to be. But I finished. She asked if I could file, answer phones, handle paperwork, stay late when needed. "Yes," I said to everything. "Yes, I can." Finally, she leaned back, arms crossed. Starting pay is low, $3,500 a month, $4,500 if you pass probation. Can you handle that? Yes, I whispered. Can you start tomorrow? I blinked. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. Then the words sank in. Yes, I can. When I walked out of that office, the sun hit my face so bright I had to stop and squint, and for the first time in years, I felt something warm spreading in my chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but maybe the first spark of it. The next morning, I dressed like I hadn't in-ear slacks, a plain blouse, even a touch of lipstick. Sophie looked at me with wide eyes. Mommy, are you going to a party? I laughed and kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart, Mommy's going to work. Her little face lit up, and she clapped her hands. Like Daddy? Yeah, I said softly, like Daddy. Starting that job was like learning to breathe all over again. The office was small, just a handful of employees. My desk was tucked into the corner, piled high with files. My tasks were simple: answer phones, make copies, file paperwork, but I treated every detail like it was life or death. I was rusty, my typing was slow, my filing system clumsy, but I stayed late, asked questions, watched the younger assistants, and copied how they did things. I was terrified of messing up, but slowly, I felt the pieces of myself click back into place. At home, my days became a blur. Up at dawn to get Sophie ready, drop her off at daycare, rush to work, rush back to pick her up, cook dinner, tuck her into bed, then sit down with my laptop to sort through more paperwork for the divorce. Daniel noticed, of course. One evening he leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching me pack Sophie's lunchbox. So you really think $4,000 a month is enough to raise a kid? You'll burn out in a month. And then what? I didn't even look at him. At least I'm trying. That's more than I can say for you. He scoffed. You think you can outlast me in court? Custody's mine. You've got no stability, no house, no savings. I clenched the lid on Sophie's sandwich box so hard it nearly cracked. We'll see what the judge thinks about stability. He laughed. But there was something nervous under it. For a while, life carried on in that tense balance. I kept working. Sophie adjusted better than I expected. She liked coming home to see me tired but smiling, liked our new little routines. I could feel her relaxing more, as if she sensed we were slowly pulling free from Daniel's shadow. And then, one night, it all came crashing down. Sophie woke me up with a soft whimper when I touched her forehead. My heart stopped. She was burning hot, her little body trembling. I rushed to get the thermometer. 40 degrees Celsius. A number I'll never forget. I tried medicine, cold compresses, anything. Nothing worked. Her skin was still blazing, her lips pale. I shook Daniel awake. He was sprawled across the guest bed, smelling of whiskey and cigarettes. Get up. Sophie's burning up. She needs a hospital now. He groaned, shoved me off. It's just a fever. Give her Tylenol. She's vomiting. I screamed. She can't breathe right. Get in the car, Daniel, now. Maybe it was the look on my face, or maybe even he realized this wasn't small. He dragged himself up, grabbed his keys, and we raced to the air. The drive was silent except for Sophie's labored breaths in my arms. Daniel cursed under his breath about how he had an early meeting. By the time we got to the hospital, I was shaking. The doctor admitted her immediately acute pneumonia. They said she needed IVs. Monitoring, Daniel stood off to the side, scrolling his phone, answering calls. Sighing impatiently, the only time he moved was when the nurse asked him to hold Sophie still for the needle. Even then, his phone buzzed. And I swear to God, he actually looked tempted to answer it while our daughter cried in his arms. When it was over and Sophie finally drifted into a restless sleep, I sat beside her bed, stroking her damp hair. My hands were trembling. My whole body was trembling. Daniel's phone rang again. He stepped out into the hallway. But his voice carried back. Yeah, I can come. Just at the hospital with the kid. Nothing serious. I'll be there in half an hour. I stared at the wall until he came back in. When he did, I didn't even look at him. Go, I said. My voice was so calm it startled me. He blinked. What? Go. To your meeting, to your friends, to Melissa. Go wherever the hell you want. You're useless here anyway. His jaw tightened. Don't start with me, Emily. I'm here, aren't I? I finally turned my eyes on him. No, you're not. Not where it counts. And you never have been, for the first time in years. I saw something flicker across his face, fear, maybe, or shame. But I didn't care anymore. Get out? I whispered. And he did. He actually left. I sat there in that harsh hospital light, Sophie's tiny hand curled in mine, and for the first time in my marriage, I felt completely alone. But underneath the emptiness, there was something else too, a strange, fierce kind of relief, because it was finally, undeniably, over. That's all for today's story. Thank you for listening. This is my channel. The tales I share drawn from life or woven from imagination are meant to offer you connection, reflection, and perhaps solace or newfound strength if you long to see your own reflection in others' journeys, or seek a glimmer of light within the maze of emotions. Subscribe to my channel. Listen with your heart. Explore the stories of life.